Hello, greetings and salutations. Welcome back to the BFC. I hope you guys are having a great day. Here's my interview with Nicholas Coriano, the Vice President of 3DX Industries. Nicholas Coriano, welcome to Buffalo Fireside Chats.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's dive right into it. Today, first, I'm going to start with the hardest question. All right, this is a tough one. How did you end up where you are today? And anyone that follows you on Twitter and they know you have motivational thumbs, we can always depend on an inspirational tweet no matter what hour of day. And that's true.
Yeah.
But what has been the path of Nick Coriano and where are you at in your career path?
Yeah, that is probably the hardest question, right? A lot to unload there. My professional career, I guess I would say started rather young. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I was a kid selling, candy to friends in school. So it started there. I learned about the stock market when I was 14. I played my first stock market game, and that really kind of set me on my trajectory. Later on, I went to finance school at the University of Connecticut, worked at Merrill Lynch, and then in Westport, Connecticut. Then went on to work at the New York Stock Exchange for a summer, and then went to law school in Chicago at John Marshall Law School. By then, I was a full addict on the stock market. I was obsessed with the stock market and just obsessed with business in general. So got out of law school, worked at a investor relations firm for a little bit, and I was building online businesses while I was in law school. Learned about blogging, SEO, e-commerce. So by the time I had graduated, I had built out 7 different websites, everything from business planning to marketing for clients to website designing. Anything I knew how to do, I built a website around. And took that and kind of ran with it. I left investor relations for a while and just did business consulting, business planning. So I ran over 2,000 business plans and pitch decks. And with that money, threw that money into real estate, built out a portfolio of real estate in upstate New York with a bunch of land out west. I also own land in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico. And I started that in law school too. And yeah, it brought me to where I am today, which is, a lot of clients come to me for business plans, pitch decks, business development. And after 10 years and 12 years now of doing that, my goal was never to become a business plan writer, but I knew that it would act as a feeder business for my potential investments. So I knew after, that by my estimates, I said, after 100 or 200 business plans, I'll be able to find 5 businesses that I think I can grow with and help take to the next level based off of, what I understand and what I've learned. And it took 2000. It wasn't 100 or 200. It was 2000 in 10 years. But, I found a good nucleus. And that's kind of what led me to 3DX. They ended up calling me out of nowhere for a business plan. I was actually fed up with the OTC and stocks and public companies in particular, just because I felt like there wasn't a lot of enough legitimate companies. And I think that part of that was me not searching for them, being lazy and thinking that everything that came across my plate was it. But I kind of got fed up with it. And I moved to the private sector where, entrepreneurs were more focused on building their business than they were on, their stock, so to speak, as they are in the IR world. And again, that was my niche view, right? Because I was in the IR world, all of our clients were coming to them in reference to, marketing the public company vehicle. So when I left there, I saw a ton of great companies, and eventually 3DX came to me. I wrote a business plan for them. They were looking for capital, and I didn't even know that they were a public company. I didn't know. I was just writing the business plan. And then when we had our first few consultations, I understood that they were a public company. I said, oh, this is interesting. And 3D printing has always been something that fascinated me. It's just always, it's interesting. You see it on the feed. I'm no expert, by the way. I just learned about that. But, it was interesting to me. And that's kind of how I ended up back in, consulting full time for public companies. So I took a position there, and then I expanded that later on. I had made some money from taking stock to write a business plan before. And, just last year, what are we in 2023? So it was 2021, 2022 that after 6 years of holding the stock that was worth nothing, it ended up, being worth 6 figures. It was a substantial amount, just under 7, wow. Right? And it opened my eyes like, wow, this is real. If you grow with a company and you stay with the company, and if I added more criteria, because the first time I did it blindly. I got lucky, right? But now it's like, if I pick the right sector, if I pick the right group of management, if I pick the right team, and right good cap structure, I'll be able to make a less risky bet that it will eventually be worth a lot more. So that's kind of how I ended up here. But I'm always testing things. I'm constantly curious. I'm always asking questions. And as far as how I ended up at my career, that's kind of the trajectory. Been a lifelong entrepreneur and just always saying yes to things. Yes, yeah, sure, yeah, let's try it. Why not? Let's do it. So that's kind of what led me here.
That's remarkable. And one thing that I can extract out of everything that you just said, and guys, I'm going to be listening to this again because I could tell you that I probably missed something because you're giving a lot of information. But one thing that stuck out was the fact that you're talking about a company that's worried about building their business and not their stock. And I think that when you look at managements, that's what I look for. I'm going to touch a little bit about on that and a little bit down the road here, but I think that's a remarkable statement. I think that anybody watching this should really take that for what it's worth, because
and by the way, it's not I don't want that statement to come off as if the entrepreneur is misguided or the CEO doesn't know what he's doing. There's a lot of factors why that happens, right? And sometimes sometimes that's part of the roadmap. It was just something that I wanted to, I'm a builder. I love to build. And at that point in my career, I was tired of it. But yeah, there's a lot of factors on why that happens, right? Sometimes they went to the market for that, and that is their focus. And sometimes they didn't know how to do the other half, or they don't have that partner yet, and they're looking for that partner. So just want to, make sure people understand that it may not be the 100% catalyst to say, hey, that's not a good investment, right? So, but generally that's what I look for. My criteria, personal criteria, that's what I look for.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And we are going to talk a bit about DDDX, triple DX, as I'm going to refer to it from now on. So I want to go back to the real estate thing, because that's something that I'm starting to get into. So, in the course of your business dealings, you successfully acquired a real estate portfolio, Homescape, which owns about 60 properties in 50 states. Talk about your
five states, not all 50, not yet.
I'm sorry. Not yet. See, not yet. I like that. Ambitious. Yeah. So 60 properties in 5 states. So let's talk about your time in real estate. What are the ins and outs to achieving success? I know this is a very loaded question. In just managing these properties, like how have you accomplished so much and are able to manage all of this?
So I'm still managing, right? We're still business is a constant juggle. There's, if you're going to have a finish line, it's either sell or liquidity. But if you're in it, you're constantly managing. So let's start there. But how did I grow it? So I'll take you back to law school. This is 12 years ago. So I'm 40 now, so I can date it so people can have a reference on how, because it really did happen quickly. I've always wanted to own real estate. Like I said, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. It was always something that was like, you know what? One day I'm going to be a real estate tycoon. One day I'm going to own real estate. One day and it was my 30th birthday and I didn't own any real estate. And I was pissed. And if you get to know me, I use that energy as a driver. So to my wife's demise sometimes, she tells her, right? Because what happens is I just get really mad at my current situation. And I start. So what happened was it was 2000, the dates are important. It was 2012. The market was crashing. So the market had just crashed from the real estate boom. And again, if you've been in enough cycles, you understand where you are. So I don't ever I try not to make any blanket statements about investment, like investing in stocks is good, investing in real estate is great. No, at certain times in cycles, they are great investments. Do they go up and they go down? And you want to buy them, hopefully when you're down, unless you're dollar cost averaging. And that's when you don't know if it's going up or down. But if you have a good idea, so in 2012, a couple catalysts happened. I was graduating law school. I'm in a dorm by myself, in an apartment by myself in Chicago. I'm pissed. I am super angry, and I'm building up steam. And I had learned something in law school. So I think this is important that if you want whatever field you want to get into, education will bring down the fear factor. Fear factor will usually stop you from doing something. So the more you get educated, the lower the fear gets. So I had just finished taking a bunch of real estate classes in law school. I kind of understood what I was looking for. But one catalyst changed everything for me. And which was, for the longest time, I had shopped real estate. I have been shopping real estate for 5-10 years. I was the guy online and driving through properties and saying, how can I get started? How can I get started? Ooh, this would be a perfect investment. This would be a perfect investment. And the problem was I didn't have any money, right? So I was driving around, and every time I looked at it, if I just had $1 million, if I just had 500,000, if I just had the 200, if I could just get a loan for this. And the real aha moment, the thing that changed everything for my real estate career was I got super mad. Number one, I got super mad. And number two, I looked at my bank account. I said, Nick, stop shopping things you can't do and start doing things you can do. And at the time, I had $4,000 in the bank account. I think I owed $1,600 in rent. My student loans were about to, I was broke, right? And all the money was accounted for somewhere else. And I went on eBay and I typed in land and I sorted it by price. And the cheapest one I found was $300. It was $295, I think it was, in Arkansas. And I bought it sight unseen. And I bought it there. Now I knew what I was looking for, right? I don't want to downplay the fact that I knew I was looking for a general warranty deed. And I knew how to search, the town listings to make sure that the seller was the actual person selling it to me, and that I didn't know how to transfer the deed, right? These are things that were important when, getting the property. So, but that was my first piece of land. And I thought when I finished buying it, now I'm in Chicago, I I haven't gone see it. I just spent $300. The deed comes in and I put it right back on eBay for $99 down and $99 a month for a total of, I think it was $1,500 or $2,000. And 30 days later, it sold.
Wow.
And I was hooked, right?
Wow.
So remember, this is a lifelong entrepreneur. So when I just bought something for $300 that everybody wants to get involved in real estate. So now I was a real estate investor for the first time. And then I sold it in less than 30 days for, 400% profit.
Wow.
I was hooked. And within the next, probably 3 months, I went back on eBay and bought another 30 pieces of land. And I called the sellers from eBay and I would try to work out deals to get them cheaper. But my next pieces of land were in Arizona. I bought, remember, this is 2012. Everything was crashing, right? Everything, they were giving it away. So that piece of land in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, I got 6 pieces of land for $500. And then I sold each one for like $49 down, $99 a month, till $1,000 was paid off, or $2,000 was paid off. So I kept doing that. So my first foray was in land. That was in land. Wow. And so by 6 months after I had graduated law school, I was in 5 states. And I had a map on my wall. And I said, I'm going to buy all 50 states. I'm going to get to all 50 states. I'm going to be able to drive around America. I'm going to be able to sleep on my land, get up in the morning, drive to the next state, and sleep on my land again. And I got to state 5 until I realized that's not a good goal. A better goal is probably something like, make sure they're profitable, or farm them, have a sustainable investment with a return. So that's, when I started shifting, and I had built my e-commerce businesses at that point. So I ran those for a while. And then I didn't get into commercial real estate investing until years later. And there was another catalyst there. I was, pissed. I was pissed that I didn't have any income producing property. I realized I set the wrong goal, which is, buying real estate shouldn't be a goal. Making money off of real estate should be a goal. And, I'm very careful about how I talk to myself, because I've realized in my career, what you say will usually come to fruition. If you put something into the air in the universe, it will conspire to give it to you. If you work for it, and you keep wishing for it, it'll come. But be careful what you wish for. So for the longest time, I was like, I want to own real estate. I want to own real estate. Well, I had real estate, but I wasn't making any money, because it was, it just wasn't as profitable just holding it. So then I said, I want income monthly. So I bought, buildings, and the money came in, and then I was like, wait a second, I'm not profitable. Right? let me reset this goal. I want money to come in every month with a big profit. And then I put them on Airbnb, and I worked out some things, and now we're there. So be very intentional. But, as far as managing the properties, it's a constant thing, right? And you want to make sure that the numbers flow like every other investment. So everything I've done from real estate to e-commerce to OTC investments, it's all the same premise, right? You're here to make money. You put $1 in. How much did you get back? If you got 80 cents back, bad deal. If you got $1.20 back, $2 back, it's a great deal. And you don't want to, you're not always shooting for the fences. A solid return, is okay. 10, 20% return, whatever's beating the market, compounds. So, that's how I got into real estate. But as far as managing it, wow, every day, you're always on it. You're always on it, and scale helps management. So when it's small, it almost never makes sense. So when I bought my first before I even had a house, by the way, I bought property before I bought a car.
Wow.
So I went and after I had bought over 25 pieces of land, I had moved back to Connecticut. I still hadn't touched a piece of land I owned. So I was at like 25 pieces of land before I still hadn't seen any of them. There's still properties I haven't seen, right? So I hadn't seen any. And I got back home to Connecticut. I said, the next piece of land I'm going to buy, I want to be able to walk because I hadn't, seen any of it. So I drew a 4-hour circle around where I lived in Connecticut, and I shopped the cheapest piece of land. I looked at my bank account, right? Back to that model. Like, I'm not reaching. It's like, what can I do right now? I want to do it right now. So I drew a 4-hour circle, and I ended up in Salisbury, upstate New York, where I'm at right now, kind of how I ended up. And I bought a piece of land, and I had to borrow my brother's car to go spend the weekend up there. And I camped up on the piece of land. It was 9 acres in upstate New York, beautiful piece of property. I ended up selling that for 4 times as much. Land has always been really good to me. The only problem is that I like to keep real estate. I don't like to sell real estate. I want to keep it, So I like the commercial stuff for that because I'm able to at least have the use of it and still have it and be able to keep it. Whereas the land, I haven't figured out farming leases yet. As soon as I figure that out, I'll keep the land, some of these pieces of land. So
that's one thing in my real estate course that I'm taking. They're talking about farming leases. Yeah. And I still have more to learn about that, but it is very, very interesting and can provide to be very lucrative, which is great.
No, it's interesting. I love that you're taking that course, because you graduated college, right? You're done, right? I'm done. Yeah, I always think it's interesting because so many people go to college or even high school and then they're done with education, and it's like, well, that's it. Got my education. It's like, good luck winning there, right? You want to always constantly be educated. So, anyone who wants to learn about this stuff, go grab my favorite pastime is any industry I want to get into. I grab a textbook. I go on Amazon or eBay and I grab the 101 textbook because that covers all the basics. So like manufacturing, I knew nothing about manufacturing when I joined DDDX. Grab the textbook. Same thing with additive manufacturing. Same thing with e-commerce. When I graduated law school and I was building out e-commerce websites, I bought the textbook that they taught e-commerce and just the little nuances. I mean, you can YouTube stuff, but just having all the information there in one hard set to show you some basics that if you miss those basics, it costs you a lot. So good for you for taking that class.
Yeah, well, you're inspiring me. So great answer. And if I could just touch on that just briefly with a quick follow-up, what would you give? Because I know a couple people are watching this that are thinking about real estate. So this question is for them. What would be the step one? What would be the first step somebody should take that is looking to get into real estate, generically speaking? Like I'm looking to be a seller's agent to start out. Maybe somebody that wants to own property or be a property man or hire property managers. What would be that first step they should take?
The first step you should take is to do it. But I don't want to give that answer because I think that answer, some people were like, well, how can I get to that? I'm trying to get to that. So one of the things that helped me out and what I would tell anyone else is get around somebody who's doing what you want to do and do whatever it takes to stay around them. So when I bought land, that again, back to this education component, right? I had just finished taking like 5 between undergrad and law school. I took 5 classes. Like there was a lot of education there. And the teachers were kind of my mentors, right? There was people that had invested in land, closed big real estate deals. So I had a mentor in that sense. Before I got into commercial real estate, I was renting an apartment in Connecticut, and it was a 40-unit apartment building. And the owner would come and, sometimes clean have his guys. He'd manage his guys there. And I can't tell you how many times I picked his brain, right? And my opening line was, hey, I want to get into real estate. I need to stay next to a guy like you, right? Like I need your information. And he took a liking to me. And then I had an office at a building where I rented, a big commercial building. And I talked to the owner there too. So literally I got around anyone next to me that was already at another level. And I did anything. If you go back to, I have some videos on YouTube. I was like, hey, let me interview you. Hey, let me put you, let me advertise your properties for you. Here's a guy with a law degree, right? Like I don't need to do that for free, but here I am. Hey, I'll sweep the floor. I will sweep the floor for you, right? Just let me learn what you got. Can you tell me how and I was just constantly barraging them with questions. So if I had to give one advice for anyone trying to get into real estate, find somebody, and it can be someone close. Don't think you have to call Ray Dalio or, Donald Trump or Grant Cardone or some real estate guru. Just find somebody who owns 10 units, 20 units, or someone who's in a position where you want to be. And that's important, because if my uncle was owned real estate at one point, he owned 4 units. He was miserable. He sold it. If you ask him, he's like, don't get involved in real estate. Too much worry, right? Meanwhile, one of my mentors, Sam Pierpont, if I ask him, guys made tens of millions of dollars in real estate. He's like, great idea, Nick. This is so exciting, right? So the first time I bought a commercial piece of real estate, this is a funny story. First time I buy a commercial piece of real estate, the building was empty. So it was a 4-unit building. It was empty. It needed renovation on one of the apartments. So I bought it, and I'm like, perfect. Let's turn on all the lights. I called the electric company. Let's turn on all the lights. There's 4 meters. It's going to cost you $4,000. Perfect. Only turn on one of the lights. Like it was like, no, thank you. Right. So now I'm turning on the water. I'm turning on the building. But mind you, I've never owned a building in my life. I never owned a house. I still haven't owned a house. Right. I've rented. So all of a sudden I turn the water on. The water hasn't been turned on in years. Okay. And the building, this is the air going through the hoses. But the building, I don't know that. I do not know it's the air going through the hoses. I turn the water on and I hear this building going, I run out of the building. I think the building's going to blow up. Right? I think the building's going to blow up. I call my real estate mentor and he says, no, it's just the air in the pipes. Okay. So I turn the water on, the air's in the pipes, and we got water. Finally, 5 minutes later, the water's coming out, and I'm like, I'm feeling good. And all of a sudden, I hear a waterfall. Somewhere. I go down in the basement. There's a hole in one of the old pipes. And I look like a cartoon because we plug one hole, and another hole starts leaking. And I plug it. Then I got my feet, couple of my toes plugging holes, and I must have spent $3,000 the first night just plugging. Wow. Like emergency plumbing, which I didn't know. By the way, if that was me today, I would have just shut the water off. I kept the water on, and then I had to call the plumber at midnight. This is right. So I call my real estate mentor the next day. I think this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. I think the journey's ending. And I'm going to go bankrupt. This is it. I'm going bankrupt, right? Which is the life of an entrepreneur. It's concept. And I call my real estate mentor. He goes, this is fantastic, Nick. Do you know how much value you added to the building last night? And so just to go to show you that it's important to have good mentors, right? Because if I called my mom or my brother or a cousin after that one night, it would have been different. It would have been different. Their advice may have been, see, I told you, right, that it was too tough. Or, hey, man, I don't know what you're going to do, right? So just having that mentor there, that first week of it was catastrophe, and I can give you another hour of stories of that first week, but it was great to have someone there, and that's in any business. So for example, when I joined 3DX, I didn't know anything about manufacturing. I went to a conference and I met the former CEO of X1. X1 is one of the biggest jet 3D metal printer production companies. They got bought out by Desktop Metal. He was a NASDAQ CEO, right? So when I came into 3DX, if my goal was to get them to the NASDAQ, my goal is to build right? Again, these are all ifs, right? If my goal is to build a great 3D printing company, then I want to find someone who's already done it,
Mhm.
And that's what I found in the former CEO of X1, and the same thing happened, right? When the storm came, and all these mishaps were happening in our business, I was able to call someone with a level head and experience could give me that guidance. So, if anyone's looking to get into real estate, find a real estate agent, find a real estate developer. I would go as far as go in the yellow pages, Google, local real estate developers, local property management, and I would just show up. I would show up and tell them, very humbly with no ego, that I want to learn and I'll do anything for it. And I mean it. I'll go work for somebody for free for a week if I think that the value is there. So if it's something you want, that would be my best advice. Get a really great mentor and get a few. Don't stop at one. Try to get as many people and ask as many questions as you can.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Excellent answer. Lot there. So let's get into it. Let's talk about 3DX, triple DX. Now, I am completely ignorant to the 3D printing process. You wouldn't believe how floored I was when I saw a 3D printer in action for the first time. We're talking about, at the school, at the tech shop. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's crazy. It was truly remarkable. I probably looked like an idiot there. And the students are like, yeah, it's a 3D printer, dude. But it wasn't a metal printer. So what is metal printing? And can you explain the process?
So full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. Okay. I'm a businessman. They brought me on to 3DX for business development. So I know my place there. We have a great team of engineers, machinists, and makers, as they're called in the industry, right? Makers at 3DX. But to come back a little bit, I was just like you. When I saw that technology, I was like a little kid. I was like, wow, this is so freaking awesome. And to be honest, when I got involved with 3DX, I didn't even know metal 3D printing was a thing, right? And then when they told me it was metal 3D printing, I was like, oh, okay, what's that? And I flew out. So I am not an engineer, and it's not one of the areas. I'm a big believer in do what you're good at, and you can become proficient at other things, but don't try to be an expert at everything. Really dig in and try to be good at a couple of things. But 3D metal printing basically is a different process. The way I've seen it work is there's a machine probably the size of a big color copier at Kinko's, and there's a box that they put a metal powder in. So basically they take all these different kinds of metals, steel, and that was another thing I didn't know. Steel, there's like 100 different variations of steel. Someone asked me on Twitter the other day when I put up a part from that 3DX made, and they said, what kind of material is that? I said, I'm not sure. I think it's some kind of steel. And they're like, oh no, steel's good enough. But when I got in there, I didn't realize there's like 30, 40 different, zinc, steel this, steel that. So that whatever that metal is, it could be gold, it could be copper, it could be, pretty much anything. There's a lot of advances going on there. When it first started, it was just steel, but now they're doing all kinds of material. They break down that steel into a powder. So it's basically a powder, and that powder is in a box. They call that the build box. And they shove that build box into the printer. And then over time, there's a laser process that hardens the powder into the part. So there's a CAD design that gets entered into the computer, and the printer basically hardens that part of the steel. Wow. So it can make any complex part you want, right? And there's different kinds of 3D printing. So there's SLS 3D printing, and there's sintering. There's a sintering process. And I don't want to butcher this because the engineers are going to come after me and be like, that's not what it's like this. But basically, that's the general idea. There's a powder, and inside the powder gets hardened through a laser process or another engineering process. So there's a few machines. We use X1, where it's called binder jetting technology. But it's not as small as you would think. So one of the things that really surprised me, you would think, when I think 3D printing, and I think, by the way, it's something that investors can use to their advantage, which is, for the longest time, 3D printing we oversold it, right? The industry, and maybe not so much the industry, but media took it and oversold it because it played really well on television and it played really well on video, right? Because if you look at it, your reaction to 3D printing is everybody's reaction to 3D. It's like, oh my God, how cool is that, right? Because you're seeing this thing be created when you're adding on. So that's why. So something I learned in manufacturing, before 3D printing, they have what they call subtracting. You would take a block of something, right? And you would subtract from it, and you would chip away at it. So if you had a big block of steel and you wanted to build some kind of statue, you chip away at it. Here with additive or with 3D printing, you're adding layers, right? That's the traditional 3D printing that we see with plastic. You see the little printer come out and it's spitting out something, and layer by layer, it's going up. What we're doing is a little bit different, right? There's a powder in there, and you're shooting the technology in there, the sintering process in there, or the binder jetting technology in there to harden that piece. And then literally like Indiana Jones, it comes out of the powder, right? So you take the piece out of the powder, you dig into the powder, and the piece comes out. So what was interesting is that it's a lot bigger than I thought, right? Because not only do you have the machine for that process, then you got to take the part out and put into a curing oven. And then out of the curing oven, there's another process that has a big tank. And maybe we'll have a round table one day. Maybe we'll get some 3D printing geeks in there to get into the technology side of it. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought that, you know, was incredible was how big the process is and the industrial applications of it. So, I mean, but that's been the basics of the metal 3D printing process. And again, like I said, I'm way too familiar in there. But I thought it was just as cool as you guys. And I think that we're early because what happened was they overpromised and they told you, hey, we can do anything. And the truth is it's still in the, you know, third inning of a 7-inning game or 9-inning game, you know? So I like to, and some people disagree with me here, by the way, but I like to compare it to the e-commerce boom. You know, when e-commerce came out, everybody with a .com on Wall Street ran. And they got funding, and everything the world. E-commerce was going to change the world, right? That's what it was. And then the bubble burst. It was 2000, right? The bubble burst, and you realize, no, some of these guys are just .coms, and they don't have anything there. Some of them have real software. Some of them have this. Some of them have that. And then about 20 years later, you realize that the ones that survived, it was true, right? Amazon was going to take over the world, and eBay was going to, and these things were going to be a bedrock of our economy. So I feel like that's what happened with 3D printing. We were told, look, it can change the world, it can do everything, but the technology wasn't there yet. The same thing with e-commerce, right? Yeah, I could do it, but today, to build an e-commerce site, I could do that in an afternoon. Back in 2000, you couldn't do that in an afternoon, right? Some of these platforms didn't exist where you could do that. So that's where I think we are now. I think they just finished overpromising. The bubble has burst. And now you have these companies kind of staying around trying to figure out what to do with them, the technologies, and they're advanced in the sense that they understand it, right? So that was one of the biggest things that I loved about 3DX was like, this is a field that if you talk to, you know, 100 engineers, only a few of them are going to fully understand what's going on in that space. So I thought that was a great moat. I thought that they had a lot of leeway, a lot of headway there, that they understood something that people didn't understand. And I feel like as technologies get cheaper, because that's the technology curve, you know, they usually get cheaper. As those 3D printing technologies get cheaper, they're going to be in a competitive advantage to, you know, take advantage of that.
That's awesome. That's a great response. All right. So in regards to this, what clientele are you guys marketing to? And do you see a lot of opportunities in the future market? I mean, you sort of alluded to that a little bit in that response, but what clientele specifically are you marketing to at this point?
Yeah, so at this point, what they're doing, I think the way Roger terms it, is design for additive manufacturing, which is basically taking existing customers and showing them the technology and seeing if we can design those parts with this process, right? So what ends up happening is, you know, let's say you need a specific rotor, or, you know, your house has 1,000 things that were machined out of somewhere, a doorknob, or, you know, a part for an aviation, for an airplane, or a part for a pair of glasses, or, you know, these parts were usually done in the subtractive process, which created tons of waste, right? Think about taking a block and then chipping away, and then you look on the floor and there's all these chips of steel. A lot of times those guys either throw them away, they recycle them, but it's a lot of waste. It's a lot of waste, regardless of what it is. Waste of time, waste of energy. So one of our biggest targets is just showing our current targets, right? Our current customers, hey, we can make this part more efficient, right? And getting them to trust the process. And some things are there and some things are not there, right? There's some things that, for example, when you're doing additive manufacturing, you can imagine that the strength is not the same as cutting it from one block of steel. So there's a lot of strength testing considerations. The materials, like when you're talking about carving something out of a block, I can get a block of any kind of metal, but to get the powder version for 3D printing, right? That's industry's just proliferating. We have quite a large selection, but it's still not as robust as it would be in the subtractive. So as far as the current opportunities, number one is the current infrastructure that's already being produced. But I think that those opportunities are yet to be established to some extent. One of the most exciting things that happened in the 3D printing world was the desktop 3D printer. And the desktop 3D printer, in essence, and this I'm talking about resin, now I'm not talking plastic, right? But what happened was it allowed engineers that otherwise didn't have the $500,000 to set up a commercial application to now put it on their desktop and for them to tinker with it and for them to come up with applications. And the same thing happened, by the way, in PCs and computers, right? There was a time when computers took up a whole room. And then when the computer became a personal computer and you could put it in a house, that's when it really exploded, because that's when the average Joe or the average engineer could get on there and be like, oh, I think I can build this. And now if you look, to where we are today, E-Rock is putting out content and Nick is creating websites, right? So it allows different opportunities that we couldn't even imagine. Like we didn't know that social media marketing was going to be a profession, right? That proliferated. That word didn't even exist, 25, 30 years ago. So the current opportunities are definitely in the field of, what's our current customer base, but I do see it opening up, some of the applications to, the artistic world, I think are interesting, the personal, favorite of mine. And then of course, any kind of customization, which the world is moving to anyway, right? If you look at all product segments, they've moved to customization, everything from your clothing to your glasses. Nike's a great example of customization, right? You can go on their website and fully customize. So, but current opportunities, I think, the current customer bases and transforming that customer base into, additive, I think is where we see the biggest opportunity. And that's what we're marketing to.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to go on, I just want, as an educator, I want to ask, do you see, like, in the future, sorry, just having some internet issues here. Actually, I'm going to see if I'm able to connect to a stronger signal because I don't want to.
Yeah, no worries.
Let's see if that works out. Perfect. You were cutting out a little bit, so I wanted to transfer to my garage Wi-Fi. And I did want to ask this follow-up about, as an educator, do you see 3DX offering products and services for these metal printers to schools or vocational centers in the future, and even them offering training on how to do such things, like you guys coming into a vocational center and setting a shop up for
so
training?
to be clear, we utilize the machines. We don't make the machines. So I want to make that distinction for everybody listening. There's other companies that make the machines. We are agnostic. While we use one kind of machine, we're open to other kind of machinery as well in the future, right? So we don't make the machines. To answer your question specifically, yes. So we're tied into the University of Bridgeport. We're tied into the vocational colleges in Washington. Roger, the CEO, and the facilities are in Ferndale, Washington, and they have. We had our last annual meeting at the vocational college. So we're already there. A lot of the people that work at 3DX came from the vocational schools. So we train them when they come on to work with 3D printing. And yeah, we definitely see that in the future. We definitely see partnership. We already have ties there. We're already, they come to our shop and, we go to them when they're having an event. But yeah, we definitely see more of that. And we've actually had some communications with Gateway College about establishing, and this is further way down the road, but establishing an actual additive manufacturing program, because part of the challenge is that no one knows how to use the technology, right? So it's a gift and a curse, right? It's a curse in the sense that if you want to hire somebody in the 3D printing industry, they're going to cost you more than 6 figures because there's only a few people out there that understand it. But the gift is that we have some of those people, right? So that's, like I said, that's one of our competitive advantages, that I saw that, we have people that actually understand it. The average Joe, if you dropped off a metal 3D printing system, because it's not a machine, it's a system, right? The machine is one part of it, the curing oven, there's another piece that I'm missing that was really expensive too, but that system, the average Joe wouldn't know. The average person wouldn't know how to turn it on, right? So I felt that was again a competitive advantage. But yeah, we're entrenched in young makers, people that would otherwise be in the machining world or the metalworking world. We're definitely partnering with vocational centers there. We have our pulse on them, and we're in and out of those places all the time.
That's awesome. And that was Bridgeport, you said, right?
There's Whatcom County, Washington is the hub, but we have the University of Bridgeport, Gateway College in New Haven, Whatcom County Community College, all the vocational schools.
That's great.
All the vocational schools in Washington is where our strongest presence is. Like Rogers walks in and out of all those places, and we know all the parties there, so we're definitely tied in there.
I got to ask. All right, let's say like just one setup. For the curing oven, for how much would one setup process cost? One complete setup process.
Keeping in mind, I'll tell you what it cost us, because there's different. It costs us just shy of $1.5 million, so about $1.5 million. And that was, remember, the technology curve goes down, right? If you wanted to buy a computer 20 years ago, now you go on eBay, buy a tablet for $100, right? So it goes down, but it was but I would say today, if you want to set up a good system, talking about $1 million+ which, by the way, impressed me that when I joined 3DX, they had yet to get a big investment and put together and had 2 3D printers. And one of them was fully set up. One of them we're still setting it up. But that was impressive to me, right? Because this is not a cheap proposition. This is not resin. Because when you look at, if you type in 3D printer, the first thing that pops up is resin 3D printers and the proliferation of the desktop. And that desktop brought that price point way down. So people see it like, oh, $1,000, $2,000, you can get a 3D printer. But it is not the same in metal. Metal came, a solid decade after resin, right? The idea that, oh man, maybe we can do this with powder. So yeah, $1 million+ bucks. And then, by the way, the overhead, because it's something that takes up, a few thousand square feet. So in a commercial lot, you need venting. You need, you have to have an electrician come in and put the proper ampage in to run the system. You have to have vents to get rid of the dust that happens when you're curing and producing this stuff. So it's a big process. We have some of the pictures up on 3DX of the lab, which is a few thousand square feet. So add that to wherever you're at, right? So I would say a few million, and then a burn rate of a few thousand. And if you don't know how to operate it, now you need $100,000 a year guy there to sit there and help you not just help you operate it, but help fix whatever goes wrong. Because this is a technology. Imagine building Facebook 20 years ago, right? There was no plugins. There was no WordPress where you can just kind of put the system together. You had to put the code together yourself. So, when something breaks on a Ferrari, you don't go to AutoZone and buy the rotor, right? You got to call 3DX to make the part, right? So the same thing with, what we're dealing with. We're dealing with industrial applications where, you run it. There's a kink, got to work something out. The powder dried or the powder was wrong, got to fix something. The printer heads, got clogged. We got to figure out a way to clean them. And there's no tool to clean them. You got to make the tool to clean them. So I would say the average cost is over $1 million for a system.
Wow, that is a lot. You guys have a.
By the way, which is why not to go back to 3Ds, but I'm a fundamental investor to some extent. High risk, and I lower my high risk investments, lowering my risk almost to zero by a lot of education, inserting myself into the situation, into the investment. So me being a catalyst for the investment, and then just fundamental, like, is it cheaper? Would it be more expensive for me to build this myself than what I'm buying it for? And that was one of the things that I loved about 3DX. The market cap was so small when I got there. It's still small, it's still tiny. That I looked at the assets when I walked around the facility for the first time. I flew from New York. You know, I wasn't even involved with the company yet. They had just hired me to write a business plan, but I got so excited about the opportunity that I flew to Washington. When I walked in there and saw the machinery, my business, remember, I'm not a manufacturer, right? All I'm doing is taking pictures of the machinery. And then I went back home and I priced them all. And I compared the prices of the machinery to the market cap of the company. And they were pretty damn close. And I said to myself, well, you know, at the current market cap, it's not a bad investment just based on the fact that if my mind always goes here, liquidation. If I had to close everything up today, right, and sell all the machinery, would I get my money back? Because that's how I think of a business investment, right? I think of it, if the market cap is $10 million and I had to sell the company today, could I get 10 million bucks? If I could get 10 million bucks, then it's par. If I can get 20 million bucks, then it's undervalued, right? If I can get 5 million bucks, it's overvalued. Then I'm kind of make my assessment from there. So yeah, that was exciting for me to count all the little tools and, you know, see how much it really costs. Because a machine shop, once you're done with it, that's a 3D printing side. They also have a subtractive side. So they have, you know, the 3D printing machines, and then they have a bunch of added subtractive machinery and tooling and drill bits. So those setups, you know, they've been around forever, but they cost money too. So
yeah. Well, let's talk conferences. So I want to focus on May. 3DX is going to be at Rapid. Rapid is North America's largest and most influential additive manufacturing event. It's going to showcase 400 plus additive manufacturing exhibiting companies, showcasing the latest 3D technologies and applications in hands-on exhibits. The show will be hosted in Chicago. You guys must be absolutely pumped to be a part of this event. What can attendees expect to see, and is this open to the general public?
Yeah, so it is open to the public. You got to buy a ticket. It's not cheap. You know, I think they're like 300, 200. I don't know. Don't quote me, but you can look it up. It's not that they're not the cheapest. But everyone in additive manufacturing is there. So everyone in 3D printing world is there, and we're there just to stay in the mix. You know, we go to these shows every year, and you can expect to see our management team there, as well as some of our engineers. We send our team of makers and engineers there really to keep up with the trends, because it's an industry that's moving so fast that you want to make sure you understand what materials are out there. You know, what's the latest machine doing? Is there something that's pivoting? What's new with software? Because you not only need, there's 3 different kinds of engineers. You need a machine engineer, mechanical engineer to understand the machine. You need a chemical engineer to understand the powders, and then a software engineer to understand the software that ties in, and then a CAD designer to design. So there's a lot of components, but all of those sectors, all of those silos in the industry have advances every year. Rapid is a great spot. If you ever wanted to learn about additive manufacturing, it's like a college education in a weekend, right? You go there, you understand what's going on. All the machine makers are there. All the powder suppliers are there. So you're able to see everything. I mean, I think the last time I went to one of the events, I met a guy who created a chocolate 3D printer, and he could print anything out of chocolate. So, you know, interesting, but you never know, like, is that the thing that's going to take over Nestle? Because customization is the thing. I don't think people realize how much customization is a thing. You know, 20 years ago, Coca-Cola put everybody's name on the label of the bottle. That wasn't, you know, a marketing ploy. That was because the consumers were demanding, hey, I want to feel special when I buy something, right? I want to feel special when I buy something. So it's happening across the board in all sectors. So, you know, Rapid specifically is going to have, you know, every advancement in additive. We're going to be there representing to make sure that everybody knows about our name. That's, you know, one of the biggest reasons, the second biggest reason, but the first biggest reason is just to keep up to date, you know, with what's going on. And if you're in the area at Rapid, you know, it's going to be hosted in Chicago. If you're in Chicago, at the very least, come by to the hotel or hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. We'll meet you in the lobby if you couldn't get into the conference, you know, if you guys just want to talk 3D printing. But yeah, if you're in town and have the chance to go, it's definitely a place to learn everything. And you're going to meet all the power movers, all the CEO of all the other public 3D printing companies are there. So, you know, that's what we're excited for. You know, I always like to get to the decision makers in the industry, and the core conferences are always an easy place, right? Like, so you go to Rapid and you can meet with Stratus CEO Scott Crump, who's going to be there. the desktop metal NASDAQ CEO, Rick Fulop, is going to be there. So as an OTC company, and I'm involved with several OTC companies, but every OTC company I go to, I always tell them, set a benchmark for who you want to be like in the industry. So if there's another NASDAQ company that's $1 billion company, get around that person, find that person running that show and stay around them. So Rapid is one of those initiatives, right, where all the other NASDAQ 3D printing companies are there. So we're going to be there, right? We're going to stay in that circle.
That's awesome. On November 30th, 2022, there was some shuffling in management, and Mr. Harold Blackwell, he moved from acquisitions to government contracts lead, and will be the initial point of contact for this division within the company. So I have to ask you this. Can we expect to see government contracts for 3DX in 2023? And can you elaborate on the possibilities of obtaining such contracts? That's a juicy question for investors, I know.
Yes. So I won't give any dates. So I won't, commit to 2023. Would I like to see him? Yeah, I wanted to see him yesterday. But I will give this that's juicy for investors, which was juicy for me when I found out. They already make government contract parts. So they just don't have the contract. They're a subcontractor. So one of the most interesting things I saw was when I walked in, we were making a part and it said USN on it. And I said, what's this? This is when I'm full disclosure, I think we're going on 2 years that I signed the 5-year contract. I think this is the end of my second year where I'm at. But when I first got there, they were making a part and it said USN. I said, what's that stand for? They said United States Navy. And I just looked at it. I wanted to strangle somebody because they didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew, So the first thing, as a marketing guy, I'm big on marketing. I wanted to strangle somebody. Like, how could you not tell people this? This is incredible, And one of the things that got me excited, but the truth is, they've been doing it for years. So they've been making parts for their, everything from Boeing to U.S. Navy to military tanks. They've been doing it, but they were subcontracted. So they don't have the contract themselves. Right, another manufacturer gets the contract, and then that contract gets subbed out. Happens all the time. Boeing doesn't make every piece of the plane, right? They go and buy the pieces from somebody. The same thing with the Navy ships. So the exciting part of that is that they're already there. So we established that office because of that, right? So the idea when we shuffled Harold around was Harold has a long history in government contracts. So let's start with that. For 10 years, he's been helping companies set up their sam.gov account, get their cage code. There's, as you can imagine, dealing with the government, there's 50 steps before you can even see the jobs, or even bid on a job, right? So it's a long process, and they had it, 3DX had it, met that standard for a long time. We were subcontract. We didn't have to, by the way. It was working just fine without it. But we thought it was an area where we wanted to kind of put a little more effort into it. And since Harold had the background, we started. So we actually accomplished a lot there. Since we did that, we got the cage codes, we got the sam.gov accounts. We got set up on a bunch of portals like Metro Transit Authority and the U.S. Navy. And we've had a couple of talks with procurement officers. So it's a process, right? But to that extent, government contracts, a lot of them need to be part of the job with a company in this life cycle is getting people to understand the value of what you're offering because they don't understand it yet, right? So you're kind of taking the beating. Imagine being Jeff Bezos trying to say, no, there's going to be a value of buying your book on the website. And people are like, I can go into Barnes and Noble and read the book, right? So understanding them to comprehend all the value. So what we found ourselves doing a lot last year was not just the remedial and tedious work of setting up accounts and getting, the paperwork done, but was having interviews with the governments, right? So we had a couple conversations with the Navy and with the Army and with the Air Force and certain procurement officers so they can fully understand what is additive manufacturing. So for example, we had a conversation with the U.S. Navy that has an office in Virginia. In Virginia, there's a big port, and then there's another port in Connecticut. And we found out that the submarines, when the submarines come in, they need parts, right? This went on or that went on. And there's a backlog. there's a backlog of almost $1 billion
Wow.
in Navy and Army machinery that it comes back in, and then they got to wait on the part. And what ends up happening is they take the part from another submarine, and now that submarine is out of commission, right? So what we're trying to explain to them is, look, you don't have to wait for the part, right? And then after you can get past that hurdle, it's a series, right? Because after you get past that understanding, right, then the question becomes, okay, which parts can we do? Because we can't do everything, right? There's some things that we can't do, or there's some tolerances, whether it's for heat or strength or underwater or, you know, porousness that, you know, can't do. So as far as do we plan on seeing government contracts? The answer is we already have, you know, to some extent. Do we want to see more? Of course, right? And we put him as a lead there to make sure that we have that open dialogue directly with the Navy, which we didn't have prior. We were always a sub. So now, you know, for the first time in 2022, you know, the procurement officers at the, you know, armed forces now at least know us, and we have our cage code. We have those things. And I would say in 2023, we'll continue to build on those relationships, and, you know, we'll see where that takes us.
That's great. It sounds like you are networking appropriately and setting yourself up for future success. Good for you guys. And October 3rd, 2022, the board of directors of 3DX Industries, they announced a new share repurchase program of up to like 7.3 million shares, if I'm correct. But that was canceled. Could you just explain why that was canceled? And you guys don't have a crazy bloated share structure, so I'm just wondering, what was the purpose of it originally, and why was it canceled? Yeah,
so I mean, we have less than 100 million outstanding, so we're tiny. We one of the things I loved about it. So I take full responsibility for that. We probably shouldn't have did it in the first place. That was the truth. We didn't need to do it. But I am you know, with my business background, I understand, you know, if you want to add value to the shareholders, take away shares. That's one tactic, 1 out of 100, right? The main tactic is build a profitable business. So I want to be clear, right? That's the main tactic, is build a sustainable, profitable business. Issue a dividend, for goodness sake. But what do you call it? We're a startup company, right? So we're a small company. So what happened there is, I like to set ambitious goals. So I take full responsibility. What I do is I set ambitious goals. I like to set targets that we might not hit. That's just how I am. And I like to set super ambitious goals. So I told them, I said, we didn't even, I would say cash flow didn't even allow for the repurchase of the shares when we set the target. And internally, what I did was I set a benchmark, an ambitious benchmark that we were probably too early for. We definitely had better use of the capital. You know, we needed to make investments in our own company instead of buying out shares of, you know, the company and making the shareholders modestly, you know, more valuable. So we canceled it. And the truth was, we just, you know, I was being overzealous and over ambitious there, right? I wanted to push something that probably should have been in. I set a 5-year plan for the company when I got there. And so now we're 2 years into the plan, and that's something that probably should have been around year 5. And I pushed it up, and, you know, then we had to backtrack from it. So that's what happened. I wish there was something more exciting to say, but it was just me being overly anxious, overly ambitious, wanting to see something happen. We weren't ready for it. And yeah, I took it on the chin, and we moved forward, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, and that's one thing that is attractive about the stock itself, is that it doesn't have a bloated share structure. You guys have a market cap of less than 5 million, 175 million authorized shares, less than $1 billion outstanding shares, and a float.
Less than how many? Hold on, less than how many?
Less than $1 billion.
Yeah, way less.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, less than $1 million. I'm sorry.
Wait, yeah, less than 100 million.
100 million. I'm sorry.
Less than 100 million outstanding. Yeah, don't go. We do a lot of work to keep that.
I know, right? And that you're on a healthy outstanding share count of 20 billion. So you guys have done a phenomenal job with that. Sorry for that little mess up there. But does management see the share structure staying as stable as it is? Because I think that is one thing that is really attractive to you guys. So, and to investors, I should say.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we have authorized 175. Outstanding is less than 100 million.
Yes.
And we just increased the authorized to 175 when we were bringing on talent, because we were bringing on engineers that we wanted to compensate. And we had a new board member last year. And when we went from 100 to 175, we sat down for 2 days and mowed it over. So we are not, we are never the company that just frivolously is going to issue shares for no reason. We're going to have 20 conversations. They had been running 7 years before I got there, 6 years before I got there, and they were still at 100. And they managed to, piece together, over $2.5 million in machinery over there, for almost peanuts. They were literally working through it as they went. So they are. I would love to take credit for a tame share structure, but they were already very stable there, and they weren't taking toxic financing. They were very. I like to say cheap with their shares. But it's in a good way, right? So yeah, we're constantly looking at that. We don't issue it for any reason. If we issue one share, we're having a discussion about it, and it's not just yes, yes, yes. It's almost always no, 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 no. Okay, let's think about it, and then occasionally, if we absolutely need it, we'll issue it. But it's one of the things I wish I could take credit for that, but that's one of the things I loved about them before I got there, is that they weren't issuing shares like that. And if they did, they had a good reason to do it. They didn't just do it. So yeah, I would imagine that stays in line exactly the way it was, with the occasional financing that they're going to need to get to the next level, which I'm impressed by the way that they got as far as they did without blowing it past, a couple more. I mean, we're still only at 100.
I mean, it's remarkable because a lot of OTC companies, I mean, it's easy to get sucked into the dilution trap. And I think that you see it all the time where when shares are added, they're just added, not really because they're retaining any substantial value or bringing anything aboard or for any substantial acquisition. So it's really remarkable to see you guys have that awesome, stable share structure that has been going on for, like you said, many years. And one thing that you found attractive about,
I doubled down. I doubled down on it with them, right? Like I love that about them. I told
that's
them,
awesome.
Listen, I love that you guys haven't. There's only 44 million. So out of the 100 million, there's only 44. The rest are all restricted. 66. So I love that, and I just doubled down on that message. Like, hey, don't be issuing no shares unless it's for something valuable.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, the executives and the employees are some of the biggest shareholders there. So if you guys want to see value, they'll just be issuing it out for no reason. And when we do issue it out, it's if it's not for a piece of machinery, it's usually for a piece of machinery there, or management. When it for management, it's always restricted. When I mean management, I mean our employees too. So I call them internally, I call them partners, but legal always tells me don't call anybody partners if they're not a real partner. So, but generally our employees get all restricted, they're all unrestricted, long-term holders. And then, anytime if we issue shares, it's, we need a machine or we need a new piece for a machine, something that we can make money from later. But yeah, we have, they're very diligent there, and I'm very proud of them for that, but again, I can't take credit for that. That's Roger and the team that has been there. They've been very prudent.
Awesome. That's great news. So if you're a shareholder or potential shareholder, that should be music to your ears. On February 16th, Representative Rick Larsen, Congressman for the 2nd District in Washington State, took a tour of 3DX Industries, learning how additive manufacturing provides better products with a quicker turnaround and lower costs, which you explained earlier. What was his overall impression with the facility and the capabilities? Would you consider Congressman Larsen a point of contact for potential lobbying of products and services?
Yes, I mean, his overall impression was great. He loved the technology. I think, like everybody else, when you first see the technology, it's just like you're trying to wrap your head around what you just seen. So you need a solid 24 to just be like, "Whoa, is this real?" So, but he was impressed. He was impressed, like everybody that comes to our facilities. It's a major operation. I was impressed, so I'm sure he was impressed. But yeah, his impressions were great. And then, would I consider Congressman Larsen as a point of contact for lobbying? I mean, he's definitely somebody that we've stayed in the mix with. This is our second interaction with Congressman Larson. He's been fantastic in the manufacturing space. He's on the committee for transportation in Washington, D.C. He's one of the co-chairs there. So we make parts for bridges, some of our clients for bridges and some infrastructure stuff. So we definitely see him as a point of contact as far as lobbying. Yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to stay in the mix with, all the power players. So, just me personally, at least once a month, I email all the U.S. senators and all the congressmen. A lot of people don't know this, but their information is out there. They have to give you their email address and they have to listen to you as a constituent. So I try to do that, and I try to put, my companies and my investments in a position to win. And yeah, he's definitely, somebody that we reached out to before. He's been nothing but gracious and, hearing what we have to say. And he understands that we want to create jobs in America. He understands that bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. entails an advanced technology, so, and he believes that, I'm sure he's seen the capabilities of, what 3D printing can do. So yeah, we're always beating on their horse to kind of, hey, at least give a look our way, right? If you're, if you're in the armed forces or you're in transportation or really any sector is benefiting from this. So yeah, that's been our first kind of foray into the political side, but we have some other things in the works there too. We're putting together a delegation that might head over to a couple countries in Africa with a few ambassadors, where we think that would be interesting. And we're probably going to take another trip to DC at one point this year and try to see what other committees that we can have conversations with, in DC, to just stay in the middle of it. But yeah, it was an awesome visit, surprise visit, and it was great. But yeah, he's been wonderful for us.
Awesome. Let's talk about the shareholder event. The company's executives and representatives will present at the annual shareholder event, which will be held in Ferndale, Washington on Friday, June 9th, 2023. What can shareholders and potential shareholders expect to see at this event, and where can they register?
Yeah, so, registration is not needed. Well, you can email, in the PR, I think we put out the email. Yep. So if you just look at our last PR, they put out an email that you can just send and tell us your comment. What shareholders can expect to see is, management giving a presentation on, what we've been doing, where we're at, and where we're going, and then a tour of the facility. So you'll be able to see our 3D printers in action, our CNC guys in action, our CAD program in action. And we have, I think, a happy hour networking event after that. So usually it's a presentation, usually at the technical college. Like I said, we're embedded there. So we'll be at the technical college, giving the presentation. Then we move over to the facilities, give you guys a tour of the machine shop, our offices, and the 3D print lab, which are 3 different sections of the facility. And then we go to a networking event where we all just go and hang out and catch up with each other, a little more informal.
Awesome. What is, and I'm going to go back to talking about you in management. What's the most important thing, if you could just pick one thing of being a part of a management team for a publicly traded company, what would you say drives you on the day-to-day? What is that most important thing that you bring to the table?
That I bring to the table?
Yeah, it could be you. Yeah, personally. Yeah.
I don't know. I hope it's good energy. There's a lot of, I think you
got good energy, man. You got good energy.
I got good energy. Definitely, I've been told that, they say I have good energy. So I definitely bring a positive attitude, a can-do attitude. Mm-hmm. I definitely bring a bigger thought. I try not to think small, right? I think I can get a hold of the president if I need to, if the conversation was right, or if the opportunity, meant for it. Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly bringing that. But, I think that the biggest thing is being part of a team is kind of checking your ego at the door and making sure that you understand this is a team. Hmm. And if you don't know that, then, it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to, at a public company. In a public company, one of the best things a management team, or one of the best things you can do for being part of management, is just row in the same direction. So that's one of it sounds easy, but it's one of the hardest things to do, because imagine, especially when you're a smaller OTC company. So by the way, I use startup interchangeably And my definition of a startup is less than 10 million in revenue, right? So if you're under 10 million in revenue, you're still a startup. I don't care if you've been around 10 years or 20 years. So if you say that, it's not demeaning in any way. It's not, I'm not taking away from the legacy and everything we learned. There's a lot there. But when you're in that phase, I call it from the me to we problem. Everybody starts a business as an individual. They're one person with an idea. And then eventually they get somebody else, they sell somebody else on that idea. And it starts growing from there. It goes from me to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And eventually, hopefully, you end up like a GE or a Tesla or a Google where you have thousands of employees. Now, in between that singular person that had that idea and that 1,000 employees, that big sustainable company that can survive without you, is a process. And in that process, you know, you have to build a team. And when you're building that team, you have, in the initial stages, at least in the first 5 people, 10 people, 15, because it gets different in every stage. But in that first 5, 10 people, usually it's a group of cowboys and cowgirls that are like, screw it, let's do it, right? That's their attitude. And it's a wily time. There's no roadmap. You know, you're taking things as they come along. So in that phase of it, it's very important for people to communicate effectively, to be autonomous while working on the team. So to get things done while they're working on the team. So I think, you know, the most important part of being a team member on a publicly traded company in the management team. If you're a bigger company, it's different. If you're a bigger company, I think, you know, communication, a clear message, which I think are all important in the small, but I think that's more important. When you're in a smaller team, though, constant communication, constant good energy, because you're going to deal with a lot of arrows getting thrown your way. There's going to be reasons to quit every single day, and you just got to keep going. You know, you got to keep going. So I think communication is one of the biggest things, and then a clear message. You know, understanding where's the end, where are you guys trying to go? Where is it? So that way you can just go work backwards and kind of put together a roadmap. Because if not, you're just moving around and working, and you're not sure where you're going. So, you know, communication though I would say is high up there on that list. Making sure you guys are adequately. And by the way, communication is not talking to your employees. Communication is a two-way street, right? So it's understanding when to shut up and listen to everybody around you, and then making the most informed decisions. And sometimes that means, by the way, rowing in the direction you may not want to row on, right? Because sometimes you got 5, 6 guys, everybody thinks their idea is the best idea, and only one idea is going to fly. And what I've seen in a lot of teams is 4 people think it's a great idea, 2 people don't, whatever, they had a better idea, or they had another idea, not better idea, another idea, and now they don't want to row that way. And now the boat's not moving as fast or as efficiently as it could be, because 4 people are rowing one way and 2 of them are either rowing the other way or not rowing because they don't like the idea. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help for morale. It doesn't help for pushing it forward. So, you know, communication and really working as a team, rowing in the same direction, I think are the most important part for the management team in general.
Cool. Excellent answer. Communication is very, very important, and it is a two-way street. Remember that. Every stock has its longs and diehards. What is your message to those that are all in on 3DX?
Yeah, so I mean, my message is thank you, number one. Thank you for being all in with us. I'm all in. So that's my clear message. And then understand that, you know, where we are in the life cycle, I think, of the business is my biggest message to anyone who will be long or a diehard, right? I think that's the best thing you can do for any investment, right? Because it's very easy to get discouraged. You know, in real estate, you buy a fixer-upper, and, you know, I bought a fixer-upper one day. I fixed all the windows, brought my girl to see it, and she goes, oh my God, because the inside wasn't done right. She's like, she didn't understand. I just made all this progress, right? So she was looking at me like, look, you got a lot of work to do, you know? So I would say, you know, understand where you are in the process. And if you really are a long or a diehard, you know, never underestimate because you were very specific. You said every stock has a long or diehard. So I'm assuming you're talking about investors. Understand that because we're so early in the process and specific to 3DX, right? Don't take for granted the fact that you have the capability of reaching out to CEOs and reaching out to management, right? So I think that, my message to them, number one, is thank you. Thank you for being on the journey for us, but never underestimate the potential value you can add to your investment by the uncle who's an engineer, or the cousin who has a friend that works at NASA, or the potential for you to introduce them to a potential customer somewhere, and take a little more time to communicate with the company, because you never know where it could be added. But I would say, if you're an investor, a long or a diehard, welcome to the journey. Enjoy the ride. Hedge your risk, because if you're talking about the stock, to all extensive purposes, we are in the riskiest sector. It's a risky proposition to invest. So if you're, about to retire and you're going to liquidate your 401k to put it into 3DX, do not do that, right? It is not that it is a risky investment. So, but if you're a long and you're here to take a long-term approach on it, welcome to the ride. And, make sure you're communicating with us all the things that you think. And we have some great long-term diehard investors that I think very much, and they do that. They do hit me up on the DM, or they call the office and they're like, what I think, or what I saw. Like I had an investor the other day send me a dissertation on Twitter about how AI can change, 3D printing, which we've already been having conversations, but people don't understand that I don't care if you're at Nestle or Tesla, you don't know everything, right? So the one thing that you're thinking about could be a catalyst to something. So I encourage, those people to reach out to us when they do have an idea. And if it's something we've already thought about, or it's dumb, or it's way off par, who cares? At least you threw it out there. But there is a chance that you introduce something to us that, because you guys have the best interest. We're all on the same team. So number one, thank you. And number two, reach out, and see if there's anything else that you can add value, or we can add value with.
That's awesome. Excellent. Well, I hope you diehards enjoyed that response. So I just want to first thank you so much for coming on. I have a couple more questions for you.
No, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
It's been great. Seriously. So do you guys see your team expanding this year? Are you going to be adding more employees, more people to management in anytime in 2023?
Yeah, so I just went down that kind of that me to we problem, right? That, or I should say, that I don't like to call. Sorry, my language. Pardon my language. I try not to. There's certain words I eliminate from my vocabulary. Right? Failure, problem. There's certain words that I just try not to use. But in the process of going from me to we, right? And now we're at that phase where we're fluctuating, and what happens is, when you get to that 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 employee mark, there's a lot of expansion and contraction, because you're bringing on an employee that you thought you needed. Oh, wait, I just needed him part-time. Or wait, I needed a full-time guy here. I didn't need a contractor. Or I needed a contractor. I didn't need a full-time guy. So in that time from 5 to 30, and this is historically, this is not 3DX. This is just about any company. What happens is you go 5, 7, 10, 7, 13, 9. Right. And it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So do I see us hiring more? Yes. The answer is absolutely. Do I see the total number going up? I see it fluctuating. I see it that, we're going to expand and contract as needed in whatever area that we need it. Like manufacturing is one of those sectors that if tomorrow we get a contract for a certain amount of parts on a certain amount of machines, we're hiring more. And then when that contract's done, those guys are done too. Right. So I do see us growing. I believe that businesses, one of my common things I say on social and when I'm putting out information, is a business is not a business unless you have people. Like businesses don't run themselves. Businesses don't create themselves. Businesses create people. Disney without any executives or employees is nothing. It is not a company, right? So when you look at a hugely, wildly successful company into the future, I see lots of employees, right? So the short answer is, yeah, I definitely see us, I'm in constant recruitment mode, constantly. So since day one, my premise was at 3DX. So, and I think I've said this before publicly, let's picture us as $1 billion company, right? Let's picture us and I hate to use that. Let me rephrase that. Let's picture us as a wildly successful, sustainable business. Okay. wildly successful, right? Whatever that looks like in your imagination. It includes a boatload of people. So if you look at the hierarchy of a Fortune 500 as a benchmark, you see the CEO, and then you go down, CTO, chief manager, chief operations officer, chief marketing officer, and then you go down from there, right? And you keep going down that hierarchy as they see. So what I did, one of the first meetings I had with the management at 3DX, I put the hierarchy up on the board of a management 500 company. And I said, how many of these do we have covered, right? And as you can imagine, if you go into an OTC company, you might be able to circle 1 or 2 or 3. Luckily at 3DX, we were close to like 12, which was different, right? So the goal there is to work backwards, and we'll fill in what they call in business the management gaps, right? Like, and this is where it gets tricky, because let's say when I first started, they hadn't put out a tweet in 3 years, right? So you go there and say, well, obviously you need a social media guy, but you're not at the phase where you can hire somebody full time for social media. So now you got to balance, right? Do I get a contractor to allocate some of your time to do that, right? And we managed to obviously figure that out. But in that process, we're always, my end goal is very much, hey, if you're going to be a Fortune 500, then this is what it looks like. Now let's work backwards. And how do we fill in the gap? So I'm always in recruit mode. I'm always looking for top talent. I think people build businesses. Businesses don't build themselves. And, so I'm always looking for people first. So when I got there, one of the criteria for them bringing me on was to open up some of the shares. And we didn't think we'd get over 100. And we're still not. I think we're canceling something else for another thing that went backwards, but we're close. We're hovering at 100 million shares. We don't want to go over that. But part of that, like 5 million shares, was dedicated to let's recruit the best of the best. So if we need a chemical engineer, we got one from Unilever that had experience at Unilever and Nestle. We need a guy for government contracting. We got a guy with 10 years experience. We need a guy for whatever we needed the guy for. We've been very adequate about trying to find the best guys in the industry. So yeah, I'm always in recruit mode. As a matter of fact, full disclosure, his name is Dave Burns, used to be the CEO of X1. There he is running a public company, and I'm trying to convince him to sit on the board of 3DX, right? I'm like, hey, why don't you come over here and work with us, right? So I'm always looking for the best. And as soon as I find it, I check my ego and tell him, look, I think you're the best, and I want you to work with us because I think we're going to be the best. So I'm constant recruit mode. If I see I think, and by the way, here's another little side note on me. I think everybody has a talent genius. I think everybody's a genius at something. So people say, Nick, you're really outgoing, or you're really motivational. Well, I think everybody has that thing. And it could be, I'm good at drawing, I'm good at singing, or I'm good at, I don't know, hopscotch. There's always something that everybody's really good at. And I'm constantly meeting ordinary people that I'm reverse engineering what I think they would. I'm like, man, he's really good at that. And then I'm trying to figure out how that would play in any of my business ventures, but definitely at 3DX, right? Like I go to Rapid, and Rapid is like a breeding ground for me, right? I'm trying to steal every employee. Full disclosure. If you're going to Rapid and you got asked to join the 3DX team from Nick, you are not alone. There's a good chance that, if you're at one of those big companies, I want you to work with us. So yeah, if you don't kick me out of your booth if you see me over there, try to steal your employees.
Oh, that's great. Surrounding yourself with like-minded people that have ambition for success. I mean, that seems like a good way to approach things.
That's a hack. I'll tell you, that's to me, that's been, I haven't had a couple of life aha moments, but that was a huge aha moment for me, that literally your proximity to other ambitious people moving and grooving will somehow raise your tide. It's insane how that works. And not because they gave you money or an investment or anything, just other than being around that energy. I couldn't agree more.
That is a difference maker. And I tell people this all the time. If you surround yourself with negative people that don't have any ambition and they're always complaining, and you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be successful if you're going to surround yourself with people that don't want to put in the extra time, or even like you probably don't, they say even with marriages, opposites attract, then they attack. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things, you know what I mean? It's
funny.
true.
I never heard that. I never heard that. That's funny.
And so like, whether, in education for myself or like, going on the real estate thing, like I'm doing the real estate thing now. And I immediately called the lady who got us our home, who I used to teach her kids.
Exactly.
And Robin Suppa, if you're watching this, shout out to you. But I would honestly, first thing I did was contact somebody that I know is successful in the industry. Exactly. And I can't wait to see how much I'm going to learn. But I think surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are goal-driven and that are going to build you up is fundamental to success. I really do.
I'll add to that, because you reminded me of something that I learned again, which was, so that was the first intuition, right? Is like, go find somebody that's successful in the field you want. And what I did for a long time in my career was find the closest person, right? Because you said, I just call the person, right, that sold me my home. And that's what I would do. I would call the closest person. Now, I would say over the last, 3 or 4 years, I've managed to force myself to be uncomfortable enough to reach the person that's in the position that I want to be, which is different. It's just a little bit different. And what happened was it changed my trajectory, because the closest person may not necessarily be in the position you want to be in. They're just the most accessible. And it is a good place to start. I'm not saying don't do that. Definitely do that. But as soon as you can, become uncomfortable enough to go and seek out. It's just another layer of homework, right? But go and seek out the person that's exactly where you want to be, because it is different. It is different. They will tell you different things. Like, so for example, and by the way, some of them you don't even have to talk to. Some of them are giving you the information online, right? So I downloaded every book. I Googled one day, books by billionaires. That's what I did, Google, right? And I downloaded all of them on Audible. And I realized when you listen to them, there's a lot of common denominators. They don't complain, they're very successful, they get up early, they're disciplined, they're super disciplined. They just don't quit. You don't quit. You can't get these guys to quit, right? So there's certain common denominators that you would learn. And in real estate specifically, as well as in additive manufacturing, right? If I go talk to another machine shop that's making $1 million a year and has an additive manufacturing machine, there's a lot I can learn. I'm not discounting that. I think you can learn from anybody. I think you can learn from the person giving you a cup of coffee, right? There's always something you can learn from somebody. But it's not the same as me modeling myself after the NASDAQ company, right? Because that's exactly where I want to take 3DX, right? And the same thing with real estate I saw. If I found, I'll give you a real life example, right? The guy who has maybe $2 million of real estate is going to give me the trajectory he understands and the mistakes that he made. Whereas the guy with $1 billion in real estate is going to show me that path. And by the way, what I've found out is that none of them are really harder than, one of them is not really harder than the other. It's just different steps, but it's still the same 24 hours. There's still the same amount of stress. It's not really that much different. It's just a different map. That's all. So what I've realized is, in addition to what you just said, which is, surround yourself definitely with as many people in that industry as you can. And to your point, I'm going to revise this, which is as quickly as you can, call the guy you do have access to, because that is going to give you the momentum. And after you do that, make sure you find somebody that you do a little homework and find that person. Maybe you don't have to call them. Maybe they wrote a book, or maybe they have a podcast. But try to find that person that you say, look, I want to be there. And then I'm telling you, that person will give you the roadmap. It's one of the life hacks that in every industry now I take it with me. As soon as I enter any scenario, any industry, it's like, go, the other day at one of my buildings, I had a plumbing issue. Before I went to bed, I sat down and found a YouTuber plumber who had, 1 million followers, taught you everything about plumbing, and got my mentor. So when I called a plumber, I didn't have to, I wasn't being taken, I at least knew the basics there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. Everything is available on Google or YouTube. Like people, it's all out there. Like, and it being a homeowner now, like before I owned a home, I didn't know anything about fixing anything. Now I could demo a room and remodel if I had to.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting how that works.
You actually host a Twitter space called Microcap Madness on the old Twitter. So I'm going to put the link to that in the description below. That's every Monday, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
All right, cool. So I'll put the link to that. So if you guys are interested in learning more from Nicholas Coriano, that is a great place to start. I was able to tune in a couple weeks ago, and that was great. I want to finish up. Are there any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with viewers, whether they are traders, aspiring to be in real estate, or even going down the path of business in some capacity? What is your advice to people generally trying to succeed?
Okay, so I put a little thought into this, into trying to succeed. So after analyzing, I think I'm at book 15 on the billionaires list. So, and I'm always trying to look for the common denominators. And one of the things I found is that they don't quit. Now, I want to expand on that because that's so generic, that people say they just don't quit. But I'm going to explain why people quit and why you shouldn't quit. So there's, if you look at a graph, on a line graph, let's say you start down here, okay, I'll measure this, and you go all the way up here. And down here is you at zero for anything you're trying to be successful for. Real estate, stock investing, manufacturing, whatever you want to do. You're at zero here. And you've tried it 0 times, and you're at zero proficiency. So you want to be a great basketball player, whatever it is, you're at zero. And all the way up here, you're at greatness, right? You're great. You've succeeded. You are awesome. You are the best in class. What happened in between here? And I'm making this triangle up for a reason, because what happens is on the way, if you ever took calculus, I don't want to get too heady, I'm a big math guy, but that line is really made up of a bunch of dots. I think a lot of people don't understand that, right? So those data points end up being that dot. So if you trade stocks and you see a line graph like that, it's because the stock closed at this point, this point, this point, this point, and those are a series of dots. So I like to use a sports analogy here, right? So if you look at the best of the best in any sport, let's call it Michael Jordan for basketball, and let's call it Ronaldo for soccer, okay? And you can argue later, but anybody could be in that field up there that you think is great. The first 10 times Michael Jordan shot the basketball, he probably didn't get it in, right? He probably didn't get it in. Probably missed most of that. First time Ronaldo kicked the soccer ball, probably didn't kick it into the goal. He probably didn't even kick the ball. It probably fell, right? Those first 10 times, there's 4 phases to get from 0 to greatness. The first phase is called the idiot phase. The second phase is called the comfortable phase. The third phase is called the good phase. And the fourth phase I call the excellent, greatness. Okay, that's the fourth phase. In the first phase, you're in the idiot phase. You try something for the first time. You don't know what you're doing. You're scared. You don't understand it. And you fail most of the time, right? Most people quit here. They quit because no one likes to feel like an idiot. I don't like to feel like an idiot. It's totally normal. No one likes to feel like that. So most people quit in that phase, right? And then after you try it 10, 20, whatever amount of iterations it is, you get to the comfortable phase. Now you shot the ball 50 times. You don't look crazy like you did the first time, because the first time you didn't know how to shoot it. You didn't shoot it so far off that everyone in the court is laughing at you, right? And you're comfortable. And more importantly, you're not the idiot on the court, right? So you're feeling okay. You're feeling a little better with yourself, right? And you're comfortable. So this is another place where people quit, because they're like, I got one in, right? I got one in. I'm comfortable. I don't look stupid. I'm comfortable. Those are certain iterations. Then if you keep shooting, you get to the good phase. Now you're good, right? Now you're better than half, because if you look at the line graph, let me draw this line for everybody again, and you cut it right in half. The first quarter was the idiot phase. Then you're in the comfortable phase. Now you're in the second half. Now you're better than all these guys. So you're feeling good. And it wasn't easy. You had some work. You're feeling contented. There's part of you that's satisfied there. You're probably making in quite a few shots at this point. You're feeling good. Now, greatness comes with just doing it more than the guy who did it that was good. So what I've realized in studying these high performers is that to achieve greatness and success, it's about iterations. It's about how many times you tried it. And what I tell people is fail fast. Get through the idiot phase as fast as possible. Make the mistakes as fast as possible so you can eventually get to greatness, which is just try it again and again and again. Michael Jordan missed more shots than most players ever took because they shot more. Now, here's something that's interesting. And this is what I hope gives people the encouragement to keep going and never give up and succeed at whatever you're trying, which is if you look at the Hall of Fame for baseball, right, which is if you bat 1,000, it means you hit every single ball. You hit every single ball. In the Hall of Fame, everybody in the Hall of Fame batted 500. 500 is, which means they only hit the ball half the time. Half, which means on this curve, you're going to miss more over here. You're going to miss a little less over here. You're still going to miss when you get to greatness. But when you collectively give the average, you've only made it half the time, right? But the goal is they swung more. When they get to this level, whatever this level is for you, whatever greatness is in whatever field, they just tried it more. That's all it was. And once you understand that, it brings the fear level down, because a lot of times when you look at someone really great in a field and you say, well, he has something I don't have, or he knew something I didn't know, or yeah, and the truth is what he had was he had the discipline to iterate consistently. And trust me, I'm very empathetic to the fact that when you're at the beginning stages, no one wants to keep trying. It sucks. It's a horrible feeling when you're failing, right? So my advice there is do it quickly, as fast as you can. Make the mistakes as fast as you can. That way you do get to a situation where you're more comfortable, you're educated because you tried it, and just never give up and do more iterations than anyone in any field, and you will become greater than anyone in any field, right? In whatever field you choose. So that's my advice to people trying to succeed. Go through those iterations as quickly as possible and keep trying.
Those are true words of wisdom. And I want to state to all my viewers, it's funny he used the basketball analogy. I never left idiot phase in basketball. I suck. I suck at basketball. And you pick your battles. I didn't want to pick that battle.
That's funny. Listen, I'll give you. That's funny you say that. So I suck at basketball too. I'm horrible.
It's a great analogy. I love the analogy. It's a great analogy.
But the other day, now being 40, I got to work out more. I'm like, I need something more exciting than the gym or a run. So I went and bought a basketball, and I went there and I missed 100 shots. And I finally made one in, and I was like, good enough for me. I'm out of here. But I realized, same there, right? Like, now, do you want it? Do you want to do it?
Yep,
do you want to do is the other question, right? Which I think people have to get honest, but that's funny. Same here. Maybe one day we'll go miss some baskets together.
We'll have to get together one of these days when you're upstate, as you are now. But Nicholas Coriano, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate the time and the energy, man. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you really like that video, hit the thanks button and donate to the channel. You guys have a great day. And remember, there is more that binds us than breaks us. Peace.